They walked out of my daughter's graduation party, right in the middle of her speech. No warning, no shame. I'm Claire. And that moment told me exactly who my family really was. If that happened to your child, what would you do? I genuinely want to hear it, because that day changed the rest of our lives. The morning of Ava's graduation party smelled like cut grass and sugar. I stepped out onto the deck with a stack of paper plates in my hands and just stood there for a second, letting my eyes run over the yard. The string lights we'd hung the night before sagged a little between the fence posts. The blue and gold banner over the patio door, "Congrats, Ava," tilted to one side. The folding tables wore plastic tablecloths that didn't quite reach the ground. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. For the first time in a long time, I let myself feel something like hope. 12 years of homework, concerts, late-night projects, and early buses had led to this day. I wanted it to be simple and good. I wanted it to belong to her, not to anyone's expectations. "Propane's full," Ethan called from the corner of the yard. He stood by the grill in an old t-shirt, lid open, spatula in hand like a man preparing for battle. "We're not running out mid-burger on my watch." "That's good," I said. "I don't have a backup plan if the grill dies." He glanced around the yard, balloons tied to the fence, mason jars stacked by the lemonade, the tray of giant supermarket cupcakes waiting on the table. "It looks great, Claire," he said, and he meant it. "She's going to love it." The back door creaked behind me. Ava stepped out barefoot, cradling a glass of lemonade with both hands. Her graduation gown hung open over a white dress, the blue fabric brushing her knees. Her hair was still curled from the ceremony that morning, a little frizzier now that the humidity had set in. "Do you think it's too much?" she asked, chewing her lip as she took in the chairs, the tables, the cluster of balloons. "Or not enough?" "It's just right," I said. "It looks like us." I led her over to the photo board leaning against the fence, blue foam board, silver tape around the edges, pictures from kindergarten all the way to senior year, missing teeth, Halloween costumes, science fair ribbons, marching band parades, her whole childhood in a neat rectangle of tape and thumbtacks. She smiled, fingertips hovering over a picture of herself in second grade, holding a crooked clay bowl. "I forgot about this," she said. "You still have that bowl?" "Back of the cupboard," I said. "Holds exactly 3 grapes now." She laughed, the sound light and soft, and for a moment I could almost imagine a world where today would stay this simple. A car door slammed out front. I didn't have to see it to know. The knot in my stomach tightened before I heard the second door close. Ethan met my eyes. "Reeds?" he asked quietly. "Reeds," I said. The side gate latch clicked, and then my mother stepped into the backyard as if she were inspecting a rental property. Linda wore a pale blouse and pressed slacks, hair sprayed into careful submission. My father, Robert, shuffled behind her in his usual weekend uniform. Polo shirt, hands in pockets, face neutral. Hannah came next, heels sinking unhappily into the lawn, designer bag hooked over one arm. Her 3 kids trailed behind, each carrying a phone like an extra limb. "Hi," I called, too bright. My voice bounced off the fence. "You made it." "Of course we did," Mom said, leaning in for a brief, perfumed air kiss. Her eyes moved past me, taking in the tables, the banner, the cupcakes. "You did all this yourself?" "Ethan helped with the grill," I said. "The rest is mostly tape and prayer." Her mouth tightened in something not quite like a smile. "Well," she said, "it's nice." Hannah did her own slow scan from the mismatched folding chairs to the photo board. "It's cozy," she said, stretching the word just enough to make it clear what she meant. "Very homey." Beside her, Chloe let out a quick little laugh and turned it into a cough. Ava stepped forward before I could react. "Hi, Grandma," she said, trying for cheerful. "Hi, Grandpa. Hi, Aunt Hannah. Thanks for coming." Mom turned to her, smile widening. "Well, we had to see our graduate," she said. She reached out and patted Ava's arm twice, quick and light, then turned her attention back to the yard. No real hug, no squeeze that said, "I'm proud of you." "Big day," Hannah added, giving Ava a one-armed hug while adjusting her bag. "Chloe's already planning what she wants when she graduates. We're thinking DJ, maybe one of those tent rentals with lights." "That sounds fun," Ava said. She kept her smile, but her fingers found the edge of her gown and twisted. "Glad you all could make it," Ethan said, joining us with a dish towel over his shoulder. "Burgers and hot dogs are going on in a minute. Drinks are over there, help yourselves." Dad sniffed the air. "Smells good," he said, in the tone he used when food met the minimum requirement of being warm. Other cars began to arrive. Our neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, walked in with his wife and a store-bought salad, calling congratulations to Ava. Two of her friends from band rushed through the gate, caps in their hands, already asking where they could hang their phones to take pictures. Her English teacher came by with a small gift bag and a kind word about her essays. The backyard filled with voices and the scrape of chairs in the grass. People moved easily, laughing, taking pictures by the banner, pointing out old photos on the board. I watched Ava pose with her friends, arms thrown around shoulders, cheeks flushed, that giant blue gown swishing around her ankles. For them, this was simple joy. For her, it was joy threaded with something else. I could see it in the way her eyes kept flicking toward my parents' table. The Reeds claimed one end of a folding table and stayed there. Their plates sat empty long after Ethan declared the first round of food ready. Cups of lemonade sweated onto the plastic tablecloth untouched. Chloe scrolled on her phone. Mason picked at a napkin. Tyler swung his legs under the chair and stared at the fence. I carried over a platter of burgers, the heat rising in waves. "Can I fix you a plate?" I asked. "We've got veggie skewers, too." "Oh, I'm not sure I want anything heavy," Mom said. "We're thinking of dinner later." She glanced at Hannah. "Aren't we?" Hannah shrugged, eyes still moving around the yard as if she were raiding it. "We'll see," she said. "The kids have stuff. I just don't want to be out all afternoon. It's already been such a long day." "It's a come and go thing," I said. "You can leave whenever you need to." She replied, non-committal. I set the platter down and turned away before my face could betray anything. On the other side of the yard, Ava's friend was asking her to cut the cake later so they could get pictures with the frosting. Ava nodded, laughing. As I walked back toward the grill, I heard it, the low murmur at my back. Hannah's voice, aimed at my mother, not at me. "Are we still going later?" she whispered. "I don't want to be stuck here all afternoon." They weren't loud. They didn't have to be. I'd spent my entire life tuned to that exact frequency. "We'll go," Mom answered. "We just have to put in an appearance." A grease pop from the grill covered the sound of my sharp inhale. I stared down at the sizzling burgers, willing my shoulders not to hunch. Across the lawn, Ava's laughter faded. When I looked up, she was staring toward our table, expression caught between a smile for her friends and a question she was too polite to ask. For a moment, our eyes met. She searched my face, as if she could read the weather there and know whether to brace for rain. I smoothed my features into something neutral, passed a bun to Mr. Jenkins, nodded at a joke I barely heard. The music played, the string lights swayed gently in the warm breeze. Someone opened another bag of chips. From the outside, our backyard looked like any other graduation party on any other quiet street. Underneath, though, I felt it. A small, sharp crack forming where the surface of the day looked smooth. Something was shifting. And for the first time, I had the uneasy sense that whatever broke next wasn't going to be the banner or the balloons. People like to believe moments fall apart in an instant, as if a single sentence or one bad afternoon could undo years of effort. But standing there in my backyard, watching the Reeds sit stiffly with untouched lemonade sweating onto the tablecloth, I knew better. Scenes like this don't explode out of nowhere. They accumulate, quietly, patiently, in tiny ways that never look big enough to name. My mind drifted backward, slipping through years the way fingers move across worn pages of an old book. Fall of 2015 was the first chapter. Back then, Ethan and I lived in a small apartment over a dry cleaner that hummed through the night. The kitchen window faced a brick wall, and the only place to set our dining plates was a wobbly thrift store table we pushed against the radiator. Money was thin, but laughter wasn't. We made do with coupons and clearance racks, grateful for what we had even when the fridge held more condiments than meals. That year, Linda and Robert visited once. They walked in wearing matching quilted jackets and looked around like the place had been assembled as a prank. Linda touched the back of one chair with 2 fingers, murmuring, "Well, it's cozy." It was the same tone she used for my backyard now. They stayed exactly 40 minutes and left a card with no money inside, just a note that said, "Hope you work your way up soon." I remember folding that card in half after they walked out, wishing it didn't sting as much as it did. Years passed, and the pattern deepened quietly. Thanksgiving 2018 was the moment it fully set in. We'd driven to the Reed house, twice the size of ours, full of polished wood floors and a dining room that smelled like rosemary and old expectations. Dinner went fine. Hannah talked about the children's spelling bee trophies. Robert carved the turkey with ceremonial seriousness. I kept reminding myself to breathe. But when the check came, because restaurants were too busy and Linda didn't feel like cooking that year, the waiter set the folder neatly in the center of the table. Before anyone else even reached for it, Linda gave a bright smile and told him, "She'll take care of it," nodding right at me. No pause, no question, no glance in my direction. As if the decision had been agreed upon long before the meal started. I felt Ethan's hand brush mine under the table, a soft apology he didn't know how to voice out loud. I forced a smile at the waiter because pushing back would have felt like starting a fire in the middle of dessert. "Of course," I murmured, sliding my card inside. The waiter left, and the conversation carried on as though nothing had happened, but I felt something small shift inside me, like a hinge loosening on a door I didn't realize was carrying weight. And Ava, even then, she absorbed things without meaning to. By Back to School 2019, she'd asked for a simple blue Target backpack. It wasn't fancy, but she held it proudly in the store, swinging it by the strap while deciding between notebooks. She liked blue, always had. It reminded her of the sky before a summer storm, she'd once told me. When we arrived at the Reed house that afternoon, Chloe stood in the foyer wearing what looked like a miniature designer purse disguised as a school bag. She eyed Ava's backpack and wrinkled her nose. "Mom says cheap bags mean cheap effort," she said, matter of fact, like she was reading from a rule book. Ava's hand stilled on her zipper. "But I like blue," she whispered. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to tell her she didn't need permission to love the simple things. Instead, I just placed a hand on her shoulder. "Blue's perfect," I said quietly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But I could see it, the way her posture shrank half an inch, the way she held the bag a little closer. One small dent that would become another and another. 2020 brought the PTA fundraiser, the year Hannah was co-chair, a role she repeated with the pride of someone announcing a major political office. The school gym smelled like popcorn and hand sanitizer, streamers drooping under the fluorescent lights. I had spent weeks helping Ava study for her AP placement exams. She'd earned top marks, ranking above most students in her grade. During the fundraiser, I mentioned it gently. "Ava tested into AP classes," I told Linda, offering the news like a gift. Linda stirred her decaf coffee, scanning the bake sale table. "AP is fine," she said, "but Chloe has real leadership skills. She's team captain for 2 clubs now. Some kids are natural leaders, some are supportive types." She didn't say which one she thought Ava was, but she didn't have to. Ava overheard from a few feet away. She didn't say anything, just went to help stack chairs with the volunteers. That quiet retreat of hers always cut me deeper than shouting ever could. By spring 2022, the story had written itself into routine. Ava performed in her final choir concert of the year, 2 solos she'd practiced in the car, at the sink, in the shower. She wore a long black dress and shaky eyeliner, and when she stepped onto the stage, she scanned the crowd for familiar faces. She found mine. And Ethan's. But the seats we'd saved 2 spots down stayed empty. They never texted, didn't call. Later, Linda would say, "Oh, we must have forgotten the date," as if concerts grew on trees and children weren't watching the door. I saw Ava's shoulders fall when she realized they weren't coming. She sang beautifully anyway, but I knew she'd carry that empty seat ache with her. By the time the present pulled me back, the backyard, the music, the clink of ice in plastic cups, I felt the weight of each memory settle like layers of dust on a forgotten shelf. Across the yard, Ava stood near the balloons with a few friends, laughing in that careful way she did when she wasn't sure of the ground beneath her feet. Her eyes kept flicking toward our table, watching for signs, bracing for something she couldn't name aloud. And that was the part that broke me quietly. She'd learned it from me. From all those years of tiptoeing around the reeds, trying to make myself small enough to avoid judgment and large enough to hold everything together. A hush seemed to move across the crowd. Maybe it was just the way the sun shifted behind a cloud or the breeze lifting the edge of the tablecloth. But when I looked toward Linda, I saw her glance at her watch. Quick, discreet, familiar. The countdown had begun, and deep down I knew exactly where it was heading. It happened so fast that if I hadn't lived through the years leading up to it, the whispers, the glances, the constant clock checking, I might have missed the cruelty tucked inside the moment. But when you've trained your whole body to recognize even the smallest shift in the Reed family's mood, you feel the tremor before anyone else hears it. By 5:32 p.m., the backyard glowed under the warm halo of the string lights. The sun hung low behind the trees, turning every edge of the yard soft and golden. Grill smoke thinned into the evening air. Someone near the fence laughed as a group of teens lined up for photos, caps in their hands and sneakers sinking into the grass. It looked like a perfect ending to a long, hopeful day. Ava stepped out of the kitchen holding a cake I'd frosted the night before. Vanilla layers, blue and gold sprinkles, and a little graduation cap made of chocolate perched at the top. She carried it with both hands, her fingers steady but her smile trembling at the corners. She'd changed out of her gown but kept the white dress underneath, the fabric catching the last bit of sunlight like a quiet spotlight. "Cake time," she called gently, not shouting, just enough for the guests nearby to turn. Her voice always softened when she was proud of something. That small softness had carried her through so many school years, so many projects, so many moments where she tried to shine without taking up too much space. Neighbors moved in first, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, her choir friend Lily and her parents, a couple kids from band. They gathered around the table, smiling, leaning forward to admire the cake, phones rising to capture the moment. And at the far table near the fence, the Reed family did not move. They sat as if their chairs were rooted into the ground, Linda's hands folded neatly in her lap, Robert staring past the grill toward the house next door, Hannah scrolling her phone with the same deliberate boredom she used at PTA meetings. Chloe, Mason, and Tyler slouched in a row, legs swinging. Ava glanced in their direction, just a flick of her eyes, but enough. I saw the tiny break in her expression before she smoothed it over. "Grandma? Grandpa?" she said softly. "We're about to cut the cake." No response, just the hum of the portable speaker and the sound of teenagers giggling near the fence. I stepped closer. "Everyone's welcome to join us," I said, trying to make it sound warm, not pleading. Dad looked at his watch. That was the first crack. Ava didn't notice. She was busy setting the cake on the table and straightening the knife beside it. "Thank you all for coming," she said, turning toward the group with a shy breath. A chair scraped loudly across the grass. Hannah stood. She smoothed the front of her blouse, adjusted the strap of her bag, and gave the crowd a polite smile that didn't match the sharpness in her eyes. "We actually have somewhere more important to be," she announced, as if she were making a scheduling update in a meeting. The words hit the yard like a sudden cold gust. Ava froze, still holding the knife. Her gaze darted from Hannah to the cake to me. Before I could even process the shock, Linda stood too, brushing imaginary dust from her slacks. "Yes," she said, "we're already late. We stayed as long as we could." As long as they could, 20-something minutes, for her graduation party. Chloe let out a relieved sigh. "Finally," she muttered, grabbing her phone and slinging her small purse over her shoulder. Mason and Tyler jumped up right after her, moving quickly as if the chairs were suddenly too hot to touch. The scrape of chairs multiplied, sharp and jagged against the soft murmur of the yard. Conversations fell away one by one, replaced by a hush that spread like a ripple across the grass. Ava was still standing there, knife in hand, her other hand gripping the edge of the table. The knife dipped slightly, its tip dragging across the frosting and leaving a small, trembling smear of blue. "Wait," she began, voice cracking. "The cake, we haven't—" But Linda was already adjusting her purse. Hannah was already stepping toward the gate. Robert was already murmuring something about traffic. They turned, all of them, and walked toward the exit as if nothing of value was happening behind them. Ava watched them move, her breath hitching quietly. So quietly I might have missed it if the yard hadn't gone completely still. Someone whispered, "Are they leaving?" Another said, "Right now?" But no one stepped forward. No one said anything loud enough to stop it. It was a strange kind of silence, thick and echoing, like an auditorium after the lights go out. Ava lowered the knife slowly, fingers shaking so hard the metal tapped the table. Her eyes stayed fixed on the gate long after the latch clicked shut behind them. The balloons beside her bobbed in the faint breeze, cheerful and wrong. "Mom," her voice barely existed. "Did I do something wrong?" The question landed in me like a stone dropped from a great height. Fast, brutal, unstoppable. Neighbors looked away politely, unsure whether to comfort or stay back. Teens stared down at their shoes. Someone pretended to refill lemonade just to give us space. The Reed family's absence made its own kind of noise, loud and shameful. I stepped toward her, gently taking the knife from her hand. Her fingers were cold. She blinked up at me, trying to swallow something she didn't have words for. This time I didn't smile. I didn't say, "It's fine." I didn't make excuses for people who had never cared enough to deserve them. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her ribs shake against mine. My chin rested on her hair, still smelling faintly of the hairspray we'd used that morning. Behind us, the untouched cake sat waiting in the fading sunlight, frosting smudged where her hand had trembled. Something inside me shifted then. Something small but solid, like a door clicking shut. The years of excuses, the silent endurance, the delicate balancing act, all of it settled into place. I felt it harden, and I knew that whatever came next would not look like the years before. After everyone left and the backyard finally went quiet, the only things still standing were the banner, the balloons drooping toward the grass, and my daughter trying her hardest not to cry. The house felt heavier than the June heat, like every corner had absorbed the shock of what happened. I stood at the sliding door for a moment, watching the last glow fade from the sky. Paper plates were stacked near the grill, the ice bucket was half melted, and the knife Ava had held so hopefully still lay on the cake board, streaked with a line of blue frosting. It was all the evidence of a celebration that never got to finish. Ethan stepped inside, letting the door ease shut behind him. He carried a tray of cups, setting them gently into the sink. "I can start loading the dishwasher," he said, keeping his voice low, as if the house might break if we talked too loudly. "Sure," I murmured, but I didn't move. He rinsed a plate, glanced at me, hesitated. "Do you want me to talk to them?" he asked carefully. Maybe they didn't realize how it came across. I turned from the door. They knew exactly what they were doing. The words came out steady, not sharp, not trembling, just true. For years, I'd softened everything the Reeds did until it was almost unrecognizable. I didn't have the energy to sand down the edges tonight. Ethan nodded once, like he'd been expecting that answer. "Okay," he said simply. He didn't push further. He knew this wasn't a problem a husband could fix with a phone call. This was old, deep-rooted, the kind of hurt that grew rings like a tree. I left the kitchen and walked down the hall. The house felt dim without the chatter of guests and the bustle of the afternoon. Ava's door was cracked open, a soft rectangle of golden light spilling into the hallway. I heard the faint rustle of fabric and a shaky breath she was trying to hide. When I stepped inside, she was sitting on the floor beside her bed, still in her white dress, knees pulled to her chest. Her graduation gown was draped over her desk chair, tangled with its sash. Fairy lights along the wall glowed softly, reflecting off the tiny bits of glitter on her nails. Glitter she was picking off one fleck at a time. She didn't look up immediately. "Mom?" she whispered, voice thin. "Maybe I should have, I don't know, booked a restaurant or something. Maybe they would have stayed if it had been nicer." My heart clenched, slow and painful. "Ava? No." I sat beside her, letting our shoulders touch. This wasn't about the party. Or you. It never was. She swallowed hard, staring at her hands. Then why do they treat things like this don't matter? Like I don't matter? I exhaled, long and heavy. For years I'd tried to protect her from the truth with soft lies. They didn't mean it. They're just tired. That's just how they are. But I knew that if I said any of those tonight, I'd lose her trust in a way I could never patch back together. "This is about them," I said quietly. about their expectations, their habits, their need to feel above everything. You could have had $1,000 cake and a tent with chandeliers, and they still would have found a way to be disappointed. She lifted her eyes to mine, red-rimmed, shining. So I didn't do anything wrong? No, I said. You did everything right. They're the ones who can't see what's right in front of them. Her lower lip trembled and she leaned against me, her forehead pressing into my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her and held her until her breathing steadied. Sitting there on the carpet, in a room that still smelled faintly of hairspray and vanilla lotion, I felt something shift between us. Something honest, something long overdue. When she finally crawled into bed, I tucked the blanket around her like I used to when she was small. She looked younger somehow, lying there with her cheeks flushed and her graduation cap perched on her desk like a witness to the whole day. "Good night, Mom," she whispered. "Good night, sweetheart." I turned off the fairy lights and left her door slightly open, the way she liked it. Downstairs, the dishwasher hummed quietly, a steady rhythm in a house that felt too still. Ethan had turned off the porch lights and locked up. He squeezed my hand as he passed me in the hallway. "Get some rest," he said. "You've carried enough today." But rest wasn't coming. I sat at the dining table where the afternoon sun used to pour in. Now only the overhead light cast a small circle of gold on the wood. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, something I'd done thousands of times before, but never quite like this. My finger hovered for a moment over the automatic payment list. I scrolled until I found the one labeled Mom and Dad Mortgage, Monthly Transfer. I pressed cancel. A small confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure?" it asked. "Yes," I whispered, tapping the screen. Next was the reminder for Tyler's soccer camp payment. Delete. Then I opened my email. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something closer to release. I typed slowly. "I will not be paying for any more trips, parties, or activities. Do not put anything else on my card. Claire." I stared at it for a long moment. Years of conditioning told me to soften it, to add a smiley face, to apologize for drawing a boundary. But I didn't owe them sweetness at the expense of my daughter's dignity. I hit send. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with a notification. Message failed to deliver. Hannah's old number. Before I could set the phone down, another alert popped up. "Hannah. Wow. So this is who you are now." I turned the phone face down on the table. For the first time in my life, I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. Much later, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow, steady circles. Ethan slept beside me, breathing softly. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the dishwasher finishing its last cycle. And in that quiet, one truth settled firmly in my chest. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. But for once, I wasn't afraid of them. They called me selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. For a while, I tried to let the words roll off me the way I'd trained myself to for years. If it had stayed between us, maybe I would have found the strength to ignore it the way I always had. But it didn't stay between us. It never does with the Reeds. By Monday morning, the kitchen table had become a landing zone for constant notifications. My phone buzzed so often it rattled against the wood. I set it face down beside Ava's cereal bowl while she sliced a peach, trying to make the morning feel normal. A voicemail from Linda came through, her voice taut and offended. "We were counting on that payment. You know the mortgage is due. This isn't like you." A text from Hannah arrived seconds later. "You've always thought you were better than us. You're nothing without Ethan's money." Another, "You owe this family." I didn't open any of them. Instead, I poured Ava another splash of orange juice and asked if she wanted me to check her college supply list later. She nodded, trying for a smile, and I could see the faint shadows still under her eyes. The wounds from the party weren't healed, not even close. At my desk later that day, the buzzing continued. My office cubicle was quiet except for the occasional clatter of keyboards and the hum of the air conditioner. I kept my phone on silent, pushing it into the corner near a stack of reports. I focused on spreadsheets until the lines blurred, anything to avoid reading another message that sounded like a bill collector mixed with a guilt machine. Around noon, my phone lit up with Aunt Marianne's name. She didn't call often, only when she truly needed to say something in real time. I answered softly, "Hi, Marianne." She exhaled into the receiver. "Honey, I just left the church luncheon. I need to tell you what your mother-in-law said." Here we go, I thought. She was crying loudly, said you cut them off out of nowhere, told everyone you were turning Ava against her grandparents. People were passing her napkins and patting her arm like she'd lost a pet. I pressed my thumb against my eyebrow. Of course she did. "I'm sorry," Marianne added gently. "I told her it wasn't fair to put this on you, but she wouldn't hear it, just kept saying you blindsided them." My anger simmered low and steady like a pot I'd forgotten on the stove. But even then, I didn't call Linda. I didn't fire back. I just thanked Marianne and returned to my work, pretending my hands weren't shaking. 2 days later, Ava came home from her summer orientation meeting looking pale. She stood in the doorway holding a small pastel envelope like it was dangerous. "Mom," she whispered, "I found this in my locker. Grandma left it there." The envelope was pink with tiny gold flowers that looked like something pulled from a bargain bin. My stomach tightened as she slid out the card. Linda's handwriting curled across the page in dramatic loops. Ava read silently at first, her face draining with each line. Then she handed it to me with a small, tense movement. Inside, Linda had written, "Your mother ruined your graduation party. We wanted to stay, but she made it impossible. If she stops being so difficult, we can be a family again. This fight is hurting us all, and only you can fix it." It felt like someone had shoved a hand into my chest and twisted hard. Not because I was surprised, but because it was predictable in the exact way that still manages to hurt. Ava's voice trembled. "Is any of that true?" I stepped closer and knelt so we were eye to eye. "No," I said, steady and clear. "None of it. They walked out. They chose to leave your party. That was on them." She blinked fast, fighting tears. "Why would she say that?" "Because when they can't control me," I said softly, brushing a stray curl from her cheek, "they try to control the people I love. But I am done letting them use you to punish me. Completely done." Ava nodded, but the hurt in her eyes lodged deep inside me. That was the moment something solidified, a line I couldn't unsee. By Friday, Ethan had noticed the shift in me. We were in the living room folding laundry when he said, "Claire, this isn't going to stop unless you take a real step. You should talk to someone, a lawyer maybe." The thought made my stomach twist, but the envelope's weight still hung in the air between us. "I know," I said. "I just never thought it would come to this." "They already crossed a line," he said gently. "You're just putting a boundary where they should have had one years ago." So the next morning I drove downtown. The legal office was small, tucked between a florist and a shoe repair shop. Inside, the waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and toner. A fan turned lazily in the corner. The attorney, a calm woman in her 40s with framed degrees lining the wall behind her, offered me a seat and listened without interrupting. I laid out the events, the party, the messages, the letter to Ava, and watched her expression shift from neutral to concerned. "You do have options," she said finally. "A no-contact order could protect Ava from future harassment. It won't erase what happened, but it will set a formal boundary, and it will make it clear that any future attempts to involve her would violate that order." She slid the paperwork across the desk. My hands hovered over the pen. I thought of Ava at the cake table, her smile wobbling as chairs scraped behind her. I thought of the envelope tucked in her locker like a trap. Then I signed. It felt like drawing a line in fresh cement. Solid, final, necessary. Driving home, the sky over Harrisburg was streaked with soft pink and lavender. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I braced myself, expecting Linda or Hannah. But it wasn't them. It was an email notification. "Court filing received." I stared at the screen as the light turned green. This wasn't a family argument anymore. It was a line drawn in ink, one I should have drawn a long time ago. Top of 4. A year later, when I step into Ava's dorm room at Penn State, her graduation photo is still on her desk. Not the party, just the moment she crossed the stage, smiling like the future was finally something she could reach without permission. Her room feels lived in and warm, half-finished paintings, a plant somehow still surviving, pictures of new friends taped to the wall. She looks lighter, too. Hair in a messy bun, wearing an oversized sweatshirt. The ease of someone who's begun to outgrow an old hurt. We walk to the campus coffee shop, the one with plastic cups, loud air conditioning, and too many laptops. Ava talks about finals and late-night pizza with her roommate. I listen, noticing how none of her stories circle back to the Reeds. She doesn't flinch at the thought of family gatherings anymore, and I don't force the subject. On my drive back to Harrisburg, my phone buzzes with a call from Aunt Marianne. "I thought you should know," she says gently. "The Reeds sold their house. They're renting a small place now, and Hannah, well, she canceled Chloe's birthday trip. Money's tight." She pauses. "There have been arguments, a lot of them. People are finally seeing what you dealt with." I thank her, but the news feels distant, like it belongs to a life I stepped out of. There's no satisfaction, just a quiet understanding that consequences eventually catch up. That evening, Ava sits with me on our porch swing, sipping iced tea while the neighborhood kids ride their bikes in uneven circles. She watches them for a moment before saying softly, "Sometimes I still think about that day, not the part when they left, but the people who stayed, my friends, our neighbors, you and Dad." She turns toward me. "I'm glad you didn't make me keep pretending they were good grandparents." The words land gently but deeply. "I used to miss the idea of having loving parents," I tell her, "but not the reality of how things were." Ava nods. "Our family feels better now, smaller but real." I smile. "When you graduate college, we're throwing you another party, a real one." She laughs. "Only invite people who actually want to be there." "Exactly," I say. The porch creaks beneath us. The evening settles warm around our shoulders, and for the first time, I realize the truth. Let the Reeds keep whatever story they tell. This quiet, honest piece, is the only version that matters. Top of 4. Sitting on the porch beside Ava, watching the evening settle over our quiet street, I realized that what we lose in life is rarely as heavy as what we finally choose to let go. Family isn't always the people we come from. Sometimes it's the small circle that stays when everyone else walks out. And if we keep a little kindness in our hearts, even old cracks can let the light back in. If this story touched something in you, feel free to share your thoughts. A gentle word has a way of comforting more people than we ever expect.